Marco, how is it conservative? How is it conservative to add $1 trillion expenditure for the federal government that you're not paying for? How is it conservative? How is it conservative to add $1 trillion in military expenditures?
Rand Paul spoke more and spoke more forcefully than he has in any of the previous 3 debates. He made his points very well, but I think the problem for Rand Paul is even if he makes that argument very well, he's making it to a very small sliver of the Republican Party. So he could get everybody excited, but there just aren't that many non-interventionists in the Republican Party. It limits what he's expanding to.
That was Stephen Hayes on Fox News last night. I don't know if that's true. Small sliver in the Republican Party who is concerned about overextending our military and blowing a hole through our budget deficit and adding to our debt. I don't know. I'm not sure that's right. Joining us now, I'm delighted he's with us, Senator Rand Paul from the great state of Kentucky, presidential candidate who had that moment. I think that was without a doubt one of the best exchanges. And I think Marco Rubio was left flat-footed. I don't think he had a response to that. Senator, it's great to have you on the show. How are you?
Good morning, Laura. Glad to be with you. Yeah, I think that when you look at polling, you actually find that at least half of the Republican Party is concerned with that the debt might actually make us weaker as a country and be damaging to our national defense.
Well, Marco Rubio didn't really respond to your point of how is it conservative to allow our debt to envelop us, and also the debt that ultimately is bought by some of our adversaries, like China, and some of our economic competitors and people we're competing with for economic opportunity, like Japan or Germany. So that I never heard an answer to that.
Well, there's another question as well. You know, these tax credits that Marco supports, there's a 25% fraud rate. In fact, the Inspector General said that $4 billion of the current tax credits are going to illegal aliens. I think Rubio's plans would explode payments to illegal aliens. And this is a real problem. Until we fix the current tax credits, do we really want to double and triple the amount of tax credits we're given? I mean, really, $4 billion to illegal aliens. I think Rubio's tax credit plan will extend more tax credits to illegal aliens. And I think there's no way in the world we should be supporting something like this.
Just before we get into the immigration, Senator Paul, just so people understand on the foreign intervention polling, for instance, on the Ukraine, whether we should really stand up to Vladimir Putin in the Ukraine, only 17% in the polling done on this in July of 2014 said the current they said that we should do more to counter Russian aggression in the Ukraine. 17%, and 34% said the U.S. should be less involved. And this was this was a very substantial poll. And we know what people said when Obama was going to go into Syria with the red line. People said, "No, you're not." So I think we have to be very careful how we start saying, well, that's outside of the mainstream. And you should know that Pat Buchanan, who was on our show yesterday, Senator Paul, said that you were closer to Reagan in your views than Rubio was with his.
I think people often forget who Ronald Reagan was. And Ronald Reagan believed in peace through strength, and he believed in staring down our enemies. You can be strong without always saying that we have to commit troops into every civil war. In fact, I would argue that we were made weaker by the war in Libya, where we expended so much time and energy and we got rid of a secular dictator, but we wound up with a failed state and with ISIS now stronger in Libya. So for the interventionists like Marco Rubio, who have never met a war they don't want to be involved with, I think they make our country weaker by getting involved in these wars in the Middle East.
And the question of immigration, Rubio over the last few days and few weeks has upped his metamorphosis because he, of course, Gang of Eight, we had you on many times during the Gang of Eight discussion, Senator Paul. He led them with Schumer, came up with this bill. It was a total disaster. The people rose up, said, no, you won't. We just talked to Senator Cruz, who reminded us of all of the enforcement provisions that were offered as amendments, each of them defeated by the block of Gang of Eight. Democrats and Republicans who were in the Gang of Eight all voted against every single border enforcement measure.
Yeah, and Laura, this is an incredibly important point. There was a secret deal made between Rubio and Schumer to block all the conservative amendments. I put one forward called Trust But Verify, and it said that if you want to do any kind of immigration reform, you have to come back to Congress every year, and Congress has to vote on whether or not the border's secure. I called this Trust But Verify, that if you want reforms, the problem is the president always promises. For the last couple of decades, presidents have promised that they will secure the border. Mine would have said Congress has to vote every year on it. but the secret deal between Rubio and Schumer said, we are going to block all amendments. So they blocked all the conservative enforcement amendments, and including mine called Trust But Verify, but it was simply because Rubio went along with Chuck Schumer and there was a secret deal made. They voted in block against every conservative reform that we brought forward.
Why do you think the establishment is now moving toward Rubio? Why do you think that's happening?
I think that the status quo where they enrich themselves is fine, and they're happy with it. They're not conservative in the sense that they believe in balanced budgets, limited government, restraining the power and growth of government. They believe in just sort of making money, and for them making money is that they don't want anybody to rock the boat. And so I think Rubio will be the establishment candidate. He will not fight the status quo. The inertia of Washington will continue on. And really, he wants to increase the size of government in many ways because he wants to add $1 trillion worth of refundable child tax credits, which are basically welfare payments, and also $1 trillion in military spending. That's not a smaller government. That's going to be a bigger government.
What is your reaction to the story today that millions of dollars in bonuses have been handed out at the very VA hospitals that have been the subject of such great scandal and poor performance and over-medicating our troops? What's your reaction to that?
I think it's a crime, and if I were president, I would fire people. We passed a bill actually giving the president the power to fire people. I think one person's been fired over this VA scandal. And mark my words, it is a scandal, and it has grown. I've worked in the VA hospitals, and we're not taking care of our veterans. In fact, this child tax credit that Marco's for would be bigger than all the money we spend on the veterans.
Oh, my gosh. I mean, when you see this, Senator Paul, I mean, millions and millions of dollars shoveled out to these employees. It's why government has to be radically shrunk. And that means we're going to have to make tough choices. So all the cliches about, well, the military budget. Well, so they can give out more bonuses to these employees of the VA. Rand Paul, great to have you on. Great performance the other night. We really enjoyed it. Thanks so much. Up next.